All right, welcome to Fanatics Football, our football segment of the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'll be your host once again, James, and I'm joined once again by Terry, Nate, and Mete. What's up, guys?
So,
Yo.
All right, in today's episode, we are previewing the NFC North division. So we'll be talking about each team's relevance for fantasy for each position. Then we'll move right into just ranking each area of every team in this division. And then we'll just finish up with projecting a divisional record. How does that sound?
good.
Yep.
All right, we'll dive right into it. But just before we do, I just wanted to mention some news from this week. It looks like that Rams running back Cam Akers has torn his Achilles, pretty severe injury. It happened just this week, and it looks like he's going to miss the entire 2021 season. That's a pretty rough injury, and yeah, he was pretty much primed for a breakout year. I guess maybe I could get you guys' thoughts on it. I guess in terms of the injury and I guess what it means for the Rams backfield in fantasy. I guess Terry, I'll start with you. I guess what's your reaction, and I guess what do you think about for fantasy?
It's rough for Akers in general. I mean, I think this was his second year into his contract. I believe he was on the rookie deal. And with that being said, I mean, we all know how owners and ownership in general is when it comes to players that are injured, and especially with the Achilles injury as well. This may affect him when it comes to his renegotiation, whatever contract that may be. Let's just hope that he does fully recover from this injury and he can find a way to prove to everyone that he deserves one of the bigger contracts for running backs in the NFL. With that being said, I mean, if you're looking for the Rams running backs now, I think Darrell Henderson's still there. And then you got guys like Raymond Callis and Xavier Jones and Jake Funk. But most likely Darrell Henderson's going to be the lead back outside of everyone else right now.
Yeah, I think I can feel the same way. Cam Akers was just sort of getting into that position where Sean McVay was trusting him as the number one back. And then, he gets this injury, and this could pretty much derail his momentum going forward. I guess, Mete, just getting to you, I guess, what does this mean for Akers and I guess for running backs in fantasy?
Yeah, it's really tough. What it means for Akers is that he's gonna probably miss most of the year or the whole year, and then he won't even know next season if he'll be the starting back, because we know once someone's injured, someone else has to step up, and whenever that guy steps up and actually performs really well, you might just lose your spot. So it's really tough for the sophomore. And then what it means for fantasy backs, I'd say this is really good for Darrell Henderson. He's probably going to be drafted even higher now. And yeah, I think he's pretty solid, but I don't think he was usually like the main guy. Even last season, I think they were just running Henderson, Malcolm Brown, and Cam Akers. They were just splitting carries the whole year. So yeah, it looks like this season he might just get a bulk of the carries, and we'll see how he does.
Yeah, for sure. And Nate, just before I get to you, I actually have a stat that Nate probably would normally touch on. There's pretty much with this injury to Akers, in terms of like vacated touches for running backs, there's around 250 vacated touches, which is quite a bit for a backfield. And Terry, all those guys that you mentioned, like Funk and others, they have no NFL experience when it comes to being running backs. Darrell Henderson's the only one there right now. So if we're talking about like carries, I know Nate usually gets into like stats like that. I feel like Henderson, with the volume he's going to get potentially if they don't sign anyone else, like honestly, that could be enough for me to draft him in like the second round or third round, and then maybe be my number one running back in my draft. Like I know it's probably like a low end running back one, but I might even look at him as a running back one. I don't know, Nate, what are your thoughts on that? And then I guess just the Akers injury.
So I was actually looking at both Cam Akers and Henderson. They actually have similar stats lines. rushing wise. I think Henderson had like one less rushing yard with less attempts, and he was able to get more touchdowns. He has more, I guess, reception stats than Cam Akers, I think, last year. And they both only had 3 starts. So, yeah, they had like a really similar stat line. So if you think like Cam Akers was about to break out, this actually might be Henderson's chance to have a breakout season. So he's definitely a running back 2 at minimum, I think.
Yeah, that's probably his floor. Even if they do bring someone in like Duke Johnson, like a Todd Gurley, whoever might be there, a Le'Veon Bell, they're not going to take all the touches. Like we said, there's around 250 vacated touches there in that backfield. So it looks like Henderson's going to get a big workload. And by the looks of those stats, he was more efficient than Akers last year with more touchdowns and less touches. So honestly, Akers was sort of that big name, obviously, because he used the draft capital on him and all that. So McVay sort of favored him, but I still think Henderson's going to be a great option for them. I definitely think that Akers might actually have a problem coming back and becoming the starter next year, like Mete mentioned, because, when someone takes your starting role and they perform well, that could happen. So yeah, I think we can definitely look forward to a Henderson breakout season. But enough of that. Let's just get right into the division preview. Let's start with the Chicago Bears in fantasy football. I'll get right into it. Let's talk about the quarterback situation for fantasy. This is an interesting one, actually. It looks like Andy Dalton is the projected starter for this team. But this season could feature a split between him and Justin Fields. It might happen at the bye week, so it'll definitely be something interesting to look forward to. Just starting with Andy Dalton, he's probably a low end quarterback too in 12-team standard leagues. I mean, you could draft him if you want. He's probably best to be left on the waiver because we don't know how much he's going to play this season. And yeah, like I said, his ceiling is probably like a low end quarterback too, because he doesn't have any rushing upside. And then we move to Justin Fields. You probably shouldn't draft him unless you're in like dynasty or best ball, because there's no guarantee he's going to start a lot of games. Probably keep an eye on him on the waiver wire, maybe put him on your watch list or something. So if he starts, he's definitely a good pickup, because if he is starting with his rushing upside, he's pretty much his floor is going to be a mid QB2. And I mean, he could even climb to like a low end QB1 if he performs really well. So definitely he'd be a guy to watch out for. But like I said, he should only be drafted in certain leagues. Let's just move to the running backs now for fantasy. Nate, I'm going to get to you for the Bears running back situation.
So I guess I'll start with David Montgomery. I think he's most likely running back to this season. He got, I think, 14.1 fantasy points per game. So yeah, that'd probably make him an RB2, I think.
And I guess in terms of any other running backs in that depth chart, do you see any of them being draftable? Whether it's a guy like Tariq Cohen, Damian Williams, I guess, what are their roles essentially for fantasy?
I guess for fantasy, it's going to be pretty tough to say. I think Tariq Cohen, I'm not really expecting him to make too much of an impact on fantasy, or even the other running backs. Maybe you can check the waiver wire week to week. If they rest David Montgomery, they might become relevant, but for the most part, outside of David Montgomery, you're not really going to want to look too deep in the Bears.
Yeah, that's one thing that I know we talked about earlier is like when there's an injury, like with Tariq Cohen last year, and then we saw Montgomery step up in the passing game as well. I think it's going to be tough for Cohen to reclaim a lot of those targets that he had the year prior. I guess maybe you could look at him in like PPR or deep leagues, but I guess in standard or like half point PPR, he's probably going to be like a late round or like waiver wire option. And I think for Damian Williams, I agree with you, probably just best left on the waiver wire. Moving into wide receivers, Terry, let me get to you for the Bears.
Honestly, for the Bears, it's probably like 2 guys, maybe even 3, keep an eye on. Allen Robinson, you don't really need to say that much for him. He's been a top wide receiver in the game for how long? And with that being said, I mean, as long as the chemistry between him and the quarterback is there, I feel like wideout one is a easy, I would say, ranking for a guy like Robinson. Second guy, I gotta say, Daryl Mooney. Beside Robinson, I feel like he's the only other guy that you could pass to on this Bears wideout core. With that being said, when the rookie does take the reins down in Chi-Town, I feel like he'll have a bigger role with the team just because of the fact that rookie quarterbacks don't really favor one specific target as much. They try to spread it out. We see them with Justin Herbert last year. And I feel like whatever rookie quarterback takes the reins this year, it's going to happen the same again. And he does have tremendous, how should I say, field stretching capabilities. So with that being said, there might be a couple boom and bust weeks, but then having said that, wide out for if anything. Third guy, I believe his name is Anthony Miller. If your fantasy league is including, I would say, special team stats, add him. But if not, leave him on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I think you pretty much got everything there. A guy like Anthony Miller was a popular breakout target last season, but it clearly didn't happen. And Mooney was sort of that guy. So I think you're right. He is the wideout too for this team going forward. And yeah, that's pretty much the best draft options for them. Mete, let me get to you for the tight ends. I guess, who do you see for the Bears?
Yeah, so I only see one guy being their main tight end this season, and it's Cole Kmet. He's coming off his rookie year, which wasn't the best, but he'll be going into the season more experienced, and he's gonna have a new quarterback to throw to him. So I believe Dalton or even Justin Fields will be better for this offense than their quarterbacks from last season, be it Trubisky or Foles. And then also, I think that Komet is only turning 22, so there's upside for sure. And then I would probably draft him as a tight end too in all leagues, as my backup tight end.
And I guess for Jimmy Graham, it's probably like touchdown or bust on the waiver wire pretty much.
Yeah, like you said, he's very touchdown dependent, so it's kind of scary to play him. If he doesn't get that touchdown, he'll probably be giving you like 2, 3 points. So it's a risky play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the year Cole Kmet takes the number one tight end spot on this team. Like you mentioned, he's young. He had a great rookie year last year. I think we had him on our tight end awards. I can't remember whether he won or he was the runner up for last year's rookie tight end. So, yeah, he was really solid, and I think he'll keep growing in his role this year. But let's just move on to the Detroit Lions for fantasy. We'll start with the quarterbacks. Nate, let me get to you for the quarterback situation there.
So Jared Goff is going to be the starting quarterback, I think, for the Lions. For the Rams, he only had 5 starts, but he was able to get 16 fantasy points per game. I'm not sure if he'll be able to surpass that on the Lions, though. It's kind of a tougher situation than the Rams, so it'll probably be around the same. It might be a little bit higher or it might be a little bit lower, but I think I'd put him as a quarterback too.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much right on it there. He should be around the same most likely because, I mean, he's moving into a worse offense than he had in LA, but he'll probably be on the field a lot more if they're trailing in games. So should be about the same in terms of production from last year. Just moving to the running backs, Terry, let me get to you for that, for the Lions.
First guy I got in mind, DeAndre Swift. He could easily be a running back one, but then we're talking about the Lions here right now. Unfortunately, with the timeshare, that could possibly happen. Most people would consider him a running back two at the moment. But if Swift was on a winning team, you can easily say he's a running back one. Second guy I got in mind, Jamal Williams. Before I say anything negative, I want to say all these running backs in Motor City could easily be running back 2, maybe 3. I said, and with saying that,
yeah, no worries, man.
Yeah, I could. Oh my goodness. Anyway, timeshare. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So with that being said, if there is a timeshare between Williams and Swift, honestly, maybe a flex option, maybe even running back 3 at most. But if they go the other route and saying, okay, Swift, here's all the touches you can carry, be my guest. He might be a nice handcuff unless Swift does get injured, knock on wood. And then there's a third guy, I believe his name is Jameer Jefferson, something like that. Having said that, I feel like he's going to be a tremendous handcuff if both of the guys ahead of him get injured. And don't forget, you also got Kerryon Johnson on this team as well. And just to summarize, Swift, running back 2, Williams, flex or running back 4, uh, Jefferson, waiver wire, same with Kerryon Johnson, waiver wire.
Yeah, I feel like that you pretty much touched on everyone there. I think Kerryon Johnson's probably going to get cut before the season starts. No offense to him if he hasn't been cut already. But yeah, DeAndre Swift, obviously RB2 as we speak. I think Jamal Williams will be fantasy relevant because, I mean, they did spend money to go out and get him in the offseason. It's not like they're going to do that and not use him, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I think you could probably rely on both of those guys, and you could probably draft both of those guys in your leagues. But let's just get to the wide receivers. Mete, let me get to you for the Lions wideouts in fantasy.
Yeah, before that, I remember during the NFC East video, I was looking at the Eagles depth chart, and I think honestly, Kerryon Johnson is on the Eagles right now. So yeah, and then for Lions wide receivers, I went with Bashad Perriman. It's my first option. He's gonna be one of the main wide receivers in Detroit, and this season, if you're desperate at wide receiver, you could look into him, honestly. He hasn't had more than 36 catches in a season, but that's probably going to change this season as, like I said, he's going to be one of the main guys in Detroit, sorry. And then I also think that Lions are going to be losing a lot of games. So then when you're trailing, you tend to pass more. So that could also be beneficiary for him. And then I'd have him probably around like a wide receiver 5 at best in deep leagues. Otherwise, if you're in a shallow league, I'd probably just leave him on the waiver wire. And then they have Terrell Williams as well. He's also a solid wide receiver, and he's going to be one of the main guys in Detroit as well. I would probably go Terrell Williams over Perriman actually, as Williams has been playing a bit longer in the NFL, and he actually had a couple solid seasons. He had a 1,000-yard season in 2016 with the Chargers, I want to say. I'd go wide receiver 4 in deep leagues and leave him on the waiver wire again if you're in a shallow league. And then this name is pretty hard for me, Amon Ray St. Brown. I hope I didn't butcher that. I definitely wouldn't draft Brown unless you're in a dynasty league, because you've always got to keep your eyes out for rookies, and we don't know what type of player he'll be in the NFL. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye out on him. But with the Lions having weak wide receivers, and they're gonna have to play games from behind, like I said, probably since they'll be losing. There's gonna be throwing a lot again, and then that's beneficiary for all the receivers in Detroit. So there is upside, and if St. Brown can win over the coaches and see more snaps this season, definitely look out for him.
Yeah, I think you picked the right 3 wide receivers to target in fantasy. Just want to comment on, I think it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, so it's pretty close. Yeah, I think that he's primed for a great rookie season. I'll give my reason why. If you took a look at Jared Goff when he played in LA, he threw a lot of short passes to guys like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, and it looks like St. Brown's going to be that guy right there in the slot. He might be that that sort of guy underneath that's sort of like a security blanket for Goff. So I mean, if like you said, whether it's dynasty league, whether it's like a late pick in like redraft leagues, you just like take a flyer on him. I feel like there's a chance that he could really turn into something for you, maybe even as high as a flex option. So St. Brown might be a guy you want to look at. And I guess with that, I'll just go right to the tight ends. And there's pretty much one name here, and it's TJ Hawkinson. This guy, I mean, in my tight end rankings, I have him in the top 5. He could even be a top 3 if he has a breakout year this year. This guy is going to see a whole lot of targets up the middle. I just mentioned Jared Goff likes throwing short end passes. Hawkinson won't need to run far to get the ball in his hand. So if you're in half PPR or PPR, he's a guy that's going to be getting a lot of receptions. Definitely look out for him. He'll be the main target in the red zone as well, assuming the Lions can get there. No offense. And yeah, Hawkinson should be the main target here. If you're looking for anyone else, Darren Fells, he's one of those touchdown or bust type tight ends. He was like that when he was in Houston as well. He's one of those guys, if you see them running a lot of 2 tight end sets, because we know Dan Campbell, he's like a tight end coach, whatever. He really primes his tight end. So if you see Fells on the field a lot, he might turn into a good receiving option. So maybe he's a guy you can put on your watch list. I wouldn't draft him, but definitely someone to keep an eye on. So let's just move right on to the Green Bay Packers. This time, Terry, I'm going to get to you. Who would have thought this would be an interesting quarterback situation?
It is an interesting quarterback situation, especially with what transpired over the offseason. But first, you always got to go with A-Rod. Easily a quarterback one in not most, but all fantasy formats. But the question is, can he still play like 2020? Let's not get it twisted right now. Even if it's not 2020, he's still a quarterback one. But then don't try reaching for him on draft night if that's the case. With that being said, realistically, I'll put him at like quarterback 6, maybe even 7-ish, give or take. And then you got Jordan Love. I mean, we're not Nostradamus. We can't predict the future. With that being said, just leave him on the waiver wire for now until something else pops up in the news. Outside of that, just draft A-Rod.
Yeah, I think that Rodgers should be safe for now. If anything, he will play this season in Green Bay and then possibly move on after that. So I think that you should be okay drafting Aaron Rodgers. Like you said, he has top 5 upside, but we shouldn't be drafting him at his MVP price because it's going to be tough for him to get back there. So let's just get to the running backs now. Mete, let me get to you. Who do you like for the Packers for fantasy?
Yeah, so I like 2 other guys actually. The main one being Aaron Jones. I mean, Aaron Jones is a baller, running back 1 in any type of league, shallow or deep. Uh, Even if Rodgers doesn't end up playing, I think the Packers will start utilizing the run game more, as you'd have to rely on Jordan Love, who hasn't thrown a pass yet in his NFL career, other than preseason. But I wouldn't count that. So he's a solid pass catcher as well. With Jamal Williams gone, you might even see him used more as a receiver this season. And then the second guy is AJ Dillon. I think he's heading into his sophomore year. He could also be worth a look this year. As I said before, Jamal Williams is gone, so that leaves AJ Dillon as the running back 2 in Green Bay. Uh, AJ Dillon showed what he could do in Week 15 of 2020 versus the Tennessee Titans, when he ran for 124 yards on 21 carries and 2 touchdowns. So, uh, Aaron Jones gets hurt, let's knock on wood like Terry here. Look out for Dillon on the waiver wire.
Yeah, honestly, I think AJ Dillon's one of the best handcuffs you could get in fantasy football. Yeah, like you said, if something were to happen to Aaron Jones, this guy slots in as like an RB1 pretty much. Yeah, I definitely like the players you took a look at. I'm going to move right into the wideouts now for fantasy. First, talk about Devontae Adams, who's the main guy there. Obviously, he should be drafted as a wide receiver 1, probably a top end wide receiver 1, possibly the first one off the board if Aaron Rodgers is 100% playing. His upside is pretty much endless. I know that he should have finished as the receiving yards leader, if not for missing that game. But he could pretty much do it again. He can pretty much go crazy at this point. We've seen what Adams can do on the field. I guess if Rodgers isn't there, probably downgrade him to like a low end wide receiver 1, maybe like the 11-12 range, put him under maybe a guy like DK Metcalf or someone in that range. But or else, yeah, he's pretty much a wide receiver 1 all the way through. Also, I'll look at Alan Lazard. I know he was injured for a large portion of last season. But he is going to be healthy heading into this year. And we know Aaron Rodgers had great chemistry with him. So if Rodgers is playing, maybe a wide receiver 5, maybe a low end wide receiver 4. He might break into a flex spot if Rodgers really targets him, or else without Rodgers, he might be like a wide receiver 6, or maybe someone to be left on the waiver. And then obviously Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he's the definition of boomer bust at this point. He's very touchdown dependent, very deep ball dependent. Probably draft him in only best ball leagues, and probably just leave him on the waiver wire at this point in standard leagues. And then you might want to take a look at rookie Amari Rodgers if he gets the starting role in the slot. Assuming Aaron Rodgers is there, he might get some production, but if Aaron Rodgers isn't there, just only draft him in dynasty leagues. So let's just move on to the tight ends now. Nate, let me get to you for the Green Bay Packers.
So I guess the guy to look at in Green Bay is Robert Tonyan. He got 9.4 fantasy points per game last year, and he only started 8 games. So he's most likely going to be starting for the majority of the games this season. So I think that would put him as a tight end 1.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much straightforward. He's probably the only guy to look at when it comes to tight ends. Mercedes Lewis is pretty much just a blocker at this point, and the rest really aren't fantasy relevant. So we can just move right into the Minnesota Vikings. This time, Mete, I'm going to start with you. What's the quarterbacks look like for fantasy?
Yeah, so I think that Kirk Cousins is a pretty solid quarterback, as not many people give Cousins enough credit these days, as he's all over meme pages. That's how the NFL works. As if you lose, the first two people that you're gonna blame are the coach and the quarterback. So he does have a tough primetime record. I know that, but he was playing for Washington before Minnesota, which is also a tough team to play for, I think. I believe he's a solid quarterback, and in deep leagues, he'll give you quarterback 1 value on some weeks, but other than that, he's usually a quarterback 2, even in shallow leagues.
Yeah, I think you pretty much had it there. He's pretty undervalued, I think. So if you can get him as your backup quarterback, I think you're pretty much set for the year. I'll just move into talking about the running backs now. We'll start with Dalvin Cook. He's a really solid option. He should be taken in the top 3 picks in drafts. He should be an RB1, a really high-end, solid one. And I guess after that, looking at someone like Alex Madison, he's, I guess, one of those guys that you should be taken as like maybe an RB5. So maybe a guy that you wouldn't start on a weekly basis. But I mean, if Dalvin Cook goes down, we've seen what Madison can do. He can pretty much just slot right into that starting role and be like a low end RB1, high end RB2 when need be. So I think Madison's probably one of the top 10 handcuffs in the league. So definitely a guy to look at adding to your bench for fantasy football. And that's pretty much it for the running back. So let's get to wide receivers now. Nate, I'm going to get to you.
So Minnesota has a pretty decent wide receiver situation. I think all 3 of them, they have pretty high potential. I guess I'll start with Justin Jefferson. I think last season he got 14.4 fantasy points per game. He had, I think, 1,400 reception yards. He has 2 rush yards for whatever reason. I don't think that's going to be a factor at all, but I guess I just thought it's interesting to point out. I think assuming that he gets the most targets, because he did get the most targets last season, I believe, I think he'd be, I guess, somewhere around maybe wide receiver 1 potentially. You might be able to get away with drafting him lower depending on what league you're in. And I guess for Adam Thielen, I guess he's like a wide receiver 2. He does have potential to be wide receiver 1, but I think Justin Jefferson's going to be getting the most catches. And for BC Johnson, it's kind of hard to, I guess, project where he's going to be. He didn't really play too much. He only played 8 games and he only started 3. But his yards per target's really high, like 9.9. So I guess maybe you could I guess, draft him as maybe an RB3 at the most, but you might want to kind of pass on drafting him and then check the waiver wire and maybe like the first couple of weeks. And then if he's still there, then pick him up.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. Justin Jefferson, wideout 1, Adam Thielen, wideout 2, and then Johnson's probably best left on the waiver until we see, I guess, if Minnesota's going to pass more this season. And I guess just getting to the tight ends, Terry, let me get to you. What's it looking like this year?
One guy and one guy only. I believe his name is Irvin Smith Jr. And with Rudolph gone, easily going to be tight end number 1 on the team. And with that said, he's going to have a ton of opportunities if the third wideout on Minnesota does not work out. That being said, you're not paying for the production just yet, just the opportunity. And honestly, I can see him maybe. That's a good question. Maybe tight end 2. But honestly, maybe in deeper leagues, some people might take him as a tight end 1. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him on the waiver wire after draft night. So with that being said, it's kind of unpredictable with Irvin Smith Jr. And outside of that, I mean, there is the little potential of a top tight end. But yeah, that's all I got to say for him.
Yeah, I think I can agree with you. He's definitely going to have the opportunity. I guess we haven't really seen a lot from him. So I feel like in some leagues he's going as a tight end 1. I feel like that's kind of high. I feel like a high end tight end 2 is where he should be drafted at. And then I guess we'll just see from there. But yeah, I think pretty much we've gotten everyone for fantasy that's going to be relevant for this season. All right, let's just get right into the division preview. Let's start out first with ranking out the quarterbacks in this division. Terry, let me start with you. I guess, what do you see for this division?
If Rodgers wasn't playing this year, I mean, obviously we would have put Packers probably in last. But Rodgers is going to play, so put him at 1. Vikings, you got Kirk Cousins at 2. Bears, just because of the rookie plus Andy Dalton, I mean, for some reason I got to put him at 3, and then Lions I got at 4 because Jeff Goff, I feel like he won't fit in whatever's going on down in Detroit, whether it be the rebuild or just chemistry-wise with the other players.
Honestly, I'm going to have to agree with you. I had pretty much the same ranking for pretty much the same reason. Rodgers at number 1, obviously, most likely he's going to play. Let's assume he's going to play, so I'll put them at number 1. Vikings number 2, obviously Kirk Cousins has taken this team in the playoffs, so I think we can safely say he's the second best quarterback in this division. Obviously, I will put the Bears at number 3 because Dalton, pretty decent starter last year, almost got the Cowboys to the playoffs. And of course, Justin Fields, we have that upside there as a backup. And then Jared Goff at number 4, they pretty much don't have anyone behind him. So he's been decent at best, but I wouldn't call him like an amazing quarterback. So I think I'd put the Lions at number 4. But I guess, Nate, I'll get to you on quarterbacks.
So for quarterbacks, I put Green Bay first, Minnesota second. I actually put Lions third and the Bears fourth. The reason I put Lions third was mainly because of Jared Goff's experience. He's been around the block. I believe he's been to the Super Bowl before, so it's not his first rodeo. He knows what to do. It's not going to be the best situation for him, and he's not necessarily as talented as Matthew Stafford, but he's read defenses for a long time, so that might be able to kind of offset his situation. And I guess for Justin Fields, he's still a rookie, so he's really talented, but I'm just kind of like, we have to wait and see about his upside before we see it, I guess. And for Andy Dalton, I think we've like kind of seen his upside. He doesn't have like the most potential at this point in his career, so I put the Bears last because of that.
Great. And then Mete, just getting to you for your quarterbacks.
Yeah, so I actually assumed that Rodgers would not be playing since I don't think anything's got resolved between the team and Rodgers. I feel like he's still angry at them, but we'll see. And so due to that, I went Vikings 1 actually. Like I said before, I think Cousins is way too criticized, and he's still a solid quarterback who you can win with. I went with Detroit second. I like Jared Goff actually. I think he's another one of those guys who's over criticized. He's solid, and maybe a change of scenery will help him out, as there's going to be less pressure playing for Detroit rather than the Los Angeles Rams. And then third, I went with the Chicago Bears. I'm assuming that the Bears are going to start off with Andy Dalton, and for that reason, I got them at 3. Dalton is solid, but at this point, I feel like he's just a game manager, and I don't know. Watching him last season, I felt like he lost a lot of his mobility. Like he couldn't really move around the in or out of the pocket too well. And then I went with Green Bay at 4 because I'm not expecting Rodgers to start the season. I feel like Jordan Love's gonna start, and like I said before, he hasn't thrown a single NFL pass in the regular season, so we just don't know how he'll turn out right now.
And I guess I assume if Rodgers is back, you'd pretty much have them at number 1. Like, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if Rodgers is playing, Green Bay should be 1 for sure, and then everyone else I'd slide down 1 spot.
All right, for sure. And yeah, let's just move to the skill positions now. This time, Nate, I'm gonna start with you. I guess where do you see these teams for skill positions?
So I put Green Bay first, Vikings second, the Lions third, and the Bears fourth. I was looking at kind of rush and receptions totals, and I was really surprised, but the Lions were a lot higher than I expected. They actually had the highest reception totals out of the division. I'm not sure if it's because Matthew Stafford is just that good or if there's like another reason. So if it's just because of I guess Matthew Stafford's talent, then they might drop. I'm just not sure how much. So yeah, I put the Lions third and the Bears fourth because of that. And I think in terms of talent, Green Bay and the Vikings, they're just too stacked. So I put them at 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think that Matthew Stafford was a big part of that offense. Hopefully, Jared Goff can sort of help the Lions, I guess, improve in some areas. I don't know how many, but Terry, let me just move to you. I guess who do you have in order for skill positions?
Skill. It's one of those days. Skill position, Green Bay, I got 1. 2, I got the Vikings. 3, I think I put Chicago. And then 4, I got the Motor City. With Packers, I feel like they're more well-rounded with their skill positions, whether it be tight end, running back, and wide receiver. Second, I put the Vikings because they have that duel for wideout and that hardcore running back, but then they don't have that tight end to put them over the edge as of yet. Bears, they do have talent, for example, Allen Robinson, Mooney, etc. But same goes with the same explanation for the Vikings. They don't have that tight end. And then the Lions, there's not really that many names that separates them from the field beside TJ Hawkins. And outside of that, that's my explanation.
Yeah, for sure. I guess just looking at my ranking for the skill positions, I actually have the Vikings at number 1. I feel like they have the best duo for wideouts in this division. They have the best running back and running back combo. If anything happened to Dalvin Cook, I think Madison's really solid. So, and Irv Smith, I mean, a lot of people are saying he's going to break out this year, and he actually has experience on like some of the other tight ends in this division. So I'll definitely give them number 1. I'll give the Packers number 2. Obviously, they have the best single wideout in the division, which is Devontae Adams. They have one of the more premier running backs in Aaron Jones. They also have A.J. Dillon as well. And then they have Bob Tonyan, who was pretty solid last year. So I have them at number 2. Number 3, I got the Bears. Obviously, Montgomery really solid last year. Allen Robinson, probably the second best wide receiver in this division by himself. And then for tight end, obviously, Komet's coming up. They have Jimmy Graham, so pretty decent. So I put them at number 3. Number 4 is the Lions. Obviously, their wideout core is pretty depleted. Tyrell Williams, Brashad Perryman, Amara St. Brown. It's kind of depleted. And then for running back, DeAndre Swift, he's a good talent, but I just don't know how well he's going to play this year. And then for tight end, obviously they have the best one in the division in TJ Hawkinson, but I really couldn't see them above number 4. So Mete, let me get to you for your skill positions.
Yeah, I think I have the same ranking as Terry, and I mainly agree with everything he said. Green Bay won. They've got one of the best wide receivers in the game, and one of the better running backs, like you said, and they also have a solid tight end, so they're the most well-rounded, I feel like. And then the Vikings, I had at number two. They have the two great duo at wide receiver with Thielen and Jefferson, like we said. Cook, one of the best running backs as well, but I don't know about Irv Smith as of now. So yeah, that's why I put them at two. And then I went with Chicago at number three. Again, they have weak tight ends, but they do have a great receiver in Robinson, and their running back depth is really good actually with Montgomery and Tariq Cohen. And then Lions, I put at four. I like TJ Hawkinson. I feel like he's the best tight end in the division. I like what I saw from DeAndre Swift as well in his rookie year, outside of the drop week one. And then their wide receivers, I think, are way too weak, so they had to be number four for me.
Yeah, I think that the Lions definitely need to take a step up to improve their skill positions. But let's get into the offensive line now. I guess this time, Terry, let me start with you. What's your rankings in terms of offensive lines for this division?
Honestly, I gotta put the Packers at one. Second, I got Lions, surprisingly. Third, Vikings, and then Bears. I got that fourth. With Green Bay, they have a solid O line, as always. Unfortunately, they did lose Rick Wagner and then I believe Corey Lindsey. But then, as well, you gotta remember David. This is where I do horrible. But the left tackle, as
Oh,
everyone.
Bakatari, yeah.
Thank you. And then that's a good sign. And then you also got Lucas Patrick, who's going into the second year as a starter. So let's see he grows, or hopefully grows. Then you got the Lions. I mean, no one would expect the Lions, but then honestly, they're building a nice little O line there, especially from this offseason. You got Taylor Deckard and then that rookie that got drafted 7th overall at the tackles. And then you got Frank Ragnall, who's a tremendous building block for the O line as well. Question for them, the guard position. And then you got, I believe, the Vikings at three. Christian Darrisaw, tremendous left tackle as always. And then he's going to be looked on to help elevate this O line. And then you got Bears at four. I believe they lost the most for the O line this past offseason. I think they lost Bobby Massey and Charles Leno Jr. So I wouldn't be surprised if the O line allowed a lot of pressure for the quarterbacks down there in the Windy City.
Yeah, for sure. I think I pretty much have the same rankings as you. I got Packers at number one for all those same reasons. David Bakhtiari was, I believe he was a Pro Bowler. I believe he was an All Pro for this team. Obviously, they lost a couple pieces, but I mean, they still have guys like Billy Turner, like Elton Jenkins, and Lucas Patrick, and others. Really solid. Also, Mercedes Lewis, one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. So that's going to help your run blocking as well. Definitely have them at number one. I also have the Lions at number two. Maybe not surprisingly. Obviously, you mentioned Taylor Decker, really solid. Frank Caragno, and obviously drafting Penei Sewell. This line is going to be really solid. I feel like even starting this season, obviously a coach like Dan Campbell is one of those coaches that's going to specialize in those type of areas. So I feel like that this line will continue to improve. I also got the Vikings at number three. Obviously, they have some pieces here. You mentioned them drafting Christian Darrisaw. I think that was a solid pick. Definitely some of the guys that they have here really can, I guess, carve out bigger roles. A lot of them are recent draft picks like Bradbury and Cleveland and others. So, yeah, definitely they can grow into their roles. And then I do have Chicago at number four. You mentioned some of the pieces they lost. I mean, they brought in Tevin Jenkins in the draft. I thought that was a solid pick, but I guess other than that, guys like Elijah Wilkinson and others are really going to have to step it up for this line to be pretty decent because they really struggled last season. Mete, let me get to you next for the offensive lines.
Yeah, so I actually went with Detroit at one. Like we said, they drafted Penny Sewellen. Just have one concern with them, like Terry was saying. He said the guard play, and specifically, I'm looking at Jonah Jackson. He had a pretty tough year, but we'll see how he does this season. And then number two, I went with the Packers. They're actually, I think, we're one of the top O-line units from last season, but like Terry said, they're losing two starters. So I want to see how the replacements do in Green Bay before I put them at one. And then number three, I went with Minnesota. They did have one of the worst O lines from last season, but they're making changes as, like we said, they drafted Christian Darrisaw. He's probably going to play left tackle for them. They also used a third round pick on Wyatt Davis, and it looks like he might be their starting left guard. So I think James was talking about Garrett Bradbury and Ezra Cleveland. They had a rough season in 2020, so they're gonna need better play from them if they want to be a better unit. And then I also have the Bears at four. They're gonna be making a lot of changes to their offensive line as well after having a bad season. One of you guys said they're losing Lino Jr. and Massey, and we'll have to see how the replacements do. Cody Whitehair and James Daniels have been their two solid linemen. Outside of those two, though, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with all of that. The Bears really need to revamp their line. But Nate, let me get to you now. I guess what's your ranking for offensive lines?
I mostly based it off of sacks allowed. So based on that, I put Green Bay first. I think Chicago second, Vikings third, and Lions fourth. I didn't really take into account the kind of like the off-season moves. I guess you could put the Lions second based off of the off-season moves and the Bears fourth, but yeah, I just took into account just the sacks allowed.
Yeah, that's one thing about the Packers line is that yeah, I think there's a chance for them to sort of move down this year just because of how much Rodgers really releases the ball quickly, so they avoid allowing sacks, that type of thing. And if there are pieces leaving, it's going to be tough for them to sort of replicate the season they just had. But let's just move now to secondaries. Mete, this time I'm going to start with you. I guess which secondaries do you like in this division?
Secondary or front seven?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we can start with secondary. We can always get to front
Okay.
seven after.
All
Yeah.
right. So for secondary, I went Green Bay one. They're a very good secondary. They've got Jair Alexander, Adrian Amos, and Darnell Savage. Great defensive backs, and then they're probably going to need Kevin King to play better as a lot of teams were picking at him, just throwing at his way, and that was probably their biggest weakness in the secondary. And then I went Minnesota second. They lost Anthony Harris, Mike Hughes, but they added Patrick Peterson, Rashad Breeland, and Xavier Woods. So their secondary should be much better this season. Then I went Chicago third. They do have a couple solid defensive backs in Jalen Johnson and Desmond Trufant, but outside of those two, I feel like they need their other defensive backs to step up. And then I went with Detroit at four. They do have talent at defensive back, but Jeff Okuda, Quinton Dunbar, and Tracy Walker, those three need to play better. As in 2020, they had rough seasons, but they definitely have the talent to turn it around, I feel like.
Yeah. Definitely. The Lions. They're pretty young, I guess, in terms of their secondary. So I guess it's something that we'll just have to look at in terms of improvement. Nate, let me get to you for the secondaries.
So for secondaries, I looked at opposing QB completion, interceptions, and interception touchdowns. So based off of that, I have the Packers first, the Bears second, the Vikings third, and the Lions fourth.
Yeah, I think pretty straightforward. It is similar to what Mete had as well. Terry, just getting to you, I guess, what are your rankings for secondaries?
Summarize this all in one sentence for each team. First, let me just say Packers 1, Vikings 2, Bears 3, Lions 4. For the Packers, easily top 5 secondary if Kevin King improves his play. Then you got Vikings, Patrick Peterson, Xavier Woods are both free agency ads, which are nice, and uh, make it the second best in the division. Windy City's going to rely on Javon Johnson, I believe, to make the secondary great again. Then with four, just to summarize, the Lions secondary, they're all going to have to require bounce back years.
Yeah, I think you guys had pretty much similar rankings to each other. I went a little bit of a different direction for secondary. I actually had the Vikings first. I really like what they did this off season. Obviously, they have Harrison Smith, one of the best safeties in the league. They added Xavier Woods, like Mete said. I know he had a rough season in Dallas, but I still think he is pretty solid. And then obviously they have Pat Peterson, who they brought in. Obviously, Jeff Gladney, Rashad Breeland was really solid last season for the Chiefs. Cameron Dantzler is also really solid. I think that they have a great secondary. I think it's now the best one in the division. I know the Packers performed well last season, but I think this is sort of just me looking ahead to what I'm projecting. And I have the Bears at number 2. I know that they did lose some players, but I just really like their unit overall. Obviously, Eddie Jackson's pretty much their stud back there. Jalen Johnson, pretty solid. Desmond Trufant, he's really going to need to have a bounce back year coming from Detroit. Definitely wasn't his best year, but I think he should be able to bounce back in this system. Obviously, Tayshaun Gibson has really been solid as well, and Artie Burns coming from Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be really solid into this system. And yeah, they have a lot of solid pieces as well. I think this is a well-rounded unit for secondary. So I have the Bears at 2. I have the Packers at number 3. Obviously, Jair Alexander, probably one of the best defensive players in this division. Definitely really solid. Adrian Amos, solid as well. And yeah, like we said, Kevin King didn't have the best year. Darnell Savage also gave up some really bad catches, but overall he's usually pretty solid. And then they drafted Eric Stokes, so I guess we'll see where he fits in. So I do have them at number 3, and then obviously I have the Lions at number 4 with all of you guys. You guys mentioned Jeff Okudah and Tracy Walker. Obviously they're going to need to have better seasons. They drafted a guy. I am not going to attempt to pronounce this guy's name because I'm going to butcher it, but you guys all know who I'm talking about. They drafted him in the 3rd round this year. They definitely are looking to improve this secondary. So I definitely see the Lions pretty much on their way up. And Mete, I will get to the front 7 now, and I will start with you. I guess, what do you see for this division?
Yeah, okay. So for front 7, I went Chicago 1. They've got a solid front 7. We know they've got Khalil Mack. They did lose Roy Robertson Harris and Brent Urban, but they get Eddie Goldman back, and Robert Quinn, I feel like, is going to have a bounce back year. So number 1, Chicago Bears. Number 2, I went with the Minnesota Vikings. The defensive line in Minnesota was terrible last season, but they're going to get Daniel Hunter and Michael Pierce back, sorry. And then they're going to add Sheldon Richardson as well in the offseason. So there's a new D-line in Minnesota, and it should be better. Their linebackers are also great. They've got Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, Nick Weigel, and they drafted rookie Chaz Surratt. And then for 3rd, I went with the Green Bay Packers. They have a good defensive line with Kenny Clark, Zadarius Smith, and Rashawn Gray, but I feel like their linebacker units are one of the weaker ones in the NFL. So I went for 3rd. And then the Detroit Lions also had a bad defensive line unit in the 2020 season, but they're making some changes as they picked up Michael Brockers, Levi Onwuzurike. I hope I said that right. And then Ali McNeil. They're also getting back Trey Flowers from injury, so that's great. But their linebackers are also weak, like the Packers. I think Jamie Collins is their only solid linebacker, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I pretty much have the same ranking as you for front 7. I have Chicago at number 1. Obviously, you mentioned Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, really solid. Akeem Hicks, obviously really solid. Mario Edwards. I mean, you can just go down the names here. Danny Trevathan, Robert Quinn. You said you expect to have a bounce back year for him. Like this unit as a whole, like they're just going to be really solid. Yeah, so I have the Bears at number 1. I have the Vikings at number 2. You mentioned a lot of the names. Daniil Hunter, one of the best pass rushers in this division. Obviously, guys like Michael Pierce. And of course, you got to the linebackers, Anthony Barr, Kendricks. So, yeah, they're going to be really solid as well. They also drafted a couple pieces into this front 7. So, I really expect the Vikings to continue to improve. I have the Packers at number 3. The reason I have them at number 3 is they were a good pass rushing front 7, but a really bad run stopping front 7. That's what I noticed last season. They were really bad against the run. We saw some games, the amount of rush yards that they gave up. I mean, they do have some solid pieces. We talked about Kenny Clark. Obviously, guys like Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, some of the guys that they have here. They just need a few more pieces. I know they drafted Tadarius Slayton, so hopefully he can slot in. They have a couple other guys coming in from the draft to this front 7, so hopefully they can improve. But right now, I don't see them, I guess, at the level of the Bears or the Vikings. And then I have the Lions at number 4. They have some decent pieces. You mentioned Levi Onwuzurike. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He should be really solid for them coming in. They have, obviously, you mentioned Trey Flowers, Michael Brockers, Jamie Collins, obviously, really solid players. I just don't know how this unit's going to perform, I guess, under the new coaching staff. So I have them at number 4. Nate, let me get to you now for your front 7 rankings.
So for front 7, I looked at opposing rush yards, opposing rush touchdowns, sacks, combined tackles, and forced fumbles. Based on all those, I put the Packers first, the Vikings second, the Bears third, and the Lions 4th. Again, I didn't really take into account like all the off-season moves. I think some teams would have been higher if I did, but yeah, those are my rankings for front 7.
Yeah, I did mention about the Packers. Great, I guess, in terms of pressure, in terms of sacks, they were really solid. I just sort of questioned their run defense. Some games they looked great. Other games they just looked like they were able to get run on a lot. And then, Vikings and Bears are pretty close, and then Lions right after that. And I guess, Terry, getting to you on front 7s.
7, I mean, Bears 1, Vikings 2, Packers 3, Lions 4. We don't really need to say that much with the front 7 for the Bears. I mean, Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, enough said. Then you got Roquan Smith in the secondary, or not secondary, but in the linebacker core. With the Vikings, on the other hand, you got guys like Daniel Hunter, Eric Kendrick, Dalvin Tomlinson. I feel like they're way ahead of the third place team, so that's why I put them at 2. Then you got Packers at 3. Kenny Clark and Darius Smith, cornerstones on the linebacking core, but the defensive line. The linebacking core needs a lot of work. And with the Lions, there's 2 playmakers in mind, as you guys have been saying, Jamie Collins and Trey Flowers. Outside of that, defense needs a lot of work in the rebuild.
Yeah, for sure. I think we all definitely see the same way about the Lions. They really have a lot of improvements to make, but let's just get to the special teams now. I'm going to start. This was a really tough ranking for me. The teams in this division really don't have great special teams from what I've noticed. So it was really hard to rank this. So we might all be pretty different, and I think that's okay. I have the Bears at number 1. Surprisingly, I know we all joke about like them missing field goals and all that, but I mean, from what I've seen from Cairo Santos last year, he was pretty decent. Obviously, there are some better kickers in this division, but I guess just looking at everything else, Pat O'Donnell as their punter, and then Anthony Miller and Darnell Mooney as the punt and kick returners. I think Darnell Mooney needs to get most of the returns this coming season because he's really talented. I think he's one of the best route runners in this division. He definitely has the shiftiness to be able to return really well. And if he does become the starter there, I definitely could see the Bears improving on their special team. So I have them at number 1. I have the Lions at number 2. Obviously, they don't have Prater anymore, but they did get Randy Bullock. I know people laugh at him about what happened last year with the Bengals, but I really don't think he's that bad of a kicker. I think he's pretty decent. Obviously, they have Jack Fox as their punter, and they get Amon-Ra St. Brown as their punt and kick returner in the draft this year. I know we talked him up a little bit earlier. He definitely should be really solid, so I have them at number 2. At number 3, I have the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, a guy like Mason Crosby is probably the best kicker in this division, but their punting was really bad last year, and J.K. Scott, I believe, is going to be their punter. They really need to improve in punting. And then in punt and kick returning, they have Malik Taylor. They have Josh Jackson. Pretty middle-of-the-road guys. I wouldn't call them solid. I wouldn't call them bad. But, yeah, that's why I have the Packers at number 3. And then number 4, I have the Vikings. Their special teams has pretty much been all over the place. Obviously, they drafted a kicker. They drafted a long snapper. They drafted a kick returner. They pretty much just drafted every position. So I really can't rank them any higher than 4th. But I guess, Mete, let me get to you.
Yeah, so I went with the Lions at 1 actually. They were ranked 3rd in terms of special teams last season. We talked about their new additions with Randy Bullock and St. Brown. So I think he'll be a really good special teams unit. Number 2, I went with the Bears. Uh, they were ranked 9th last season in terms of special teams, and they got Anthony Miller returning punts, Darnell Mooney returning the kicks. So those are 2 great returners. And then I feel like the kickers have been kind of shaky, like we were joking about with and after Cody Parkey. And ever since they got Cairo Santos, he's been really solid actually. So yeah, they've got a great kicker as well. Number 2 for the Bears. Number 3, I went with the Packers. They were ranked 29th last season, and I feel like outside of Mason Crosby, who's been a great kicker, I don't think the special teams unit's too great. And then number 4 was the Vikings for me. Like you said, they've got a lot of rookies in the special teams, and then I feel like they were ranked kind of low last season because of Dan Bailey shanking a lot of kicks, and now he's gone. So yeah, maybe they'll be better this season.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Vikings, they really had to shake things up, and they pretty much just did that, drafting pretty much everyone. Nate, let me get to you now on special teams.
So for special teams, I looked at field goal made, field goal percentage, punt return average yards, kick return average yards, and punt. And yeah, the Bears were pretty underrated. I actually put them first. They had I think the most field goals made, and they were second in terms of field goal percentage. Only the Packers had a higher field goal percentage, but they made less field goals. And they're like second in pretty much every other category. Second in kick return, second in total yards kicked, second in punt average punt return, second in average punt yards, and I put the Lions at second. They have a pretty decent kick return and punt return team. Well, they're the best in the division, and they have a good punter as well. And I put the Packers at third. I mean, in terms of talent, I think the kicker in the Packers, you could say that he's the best in the division, but I guess they're not really making him kick as much. So his field goal made is lower than the Bears and the Lions. But in terms of like field goal percentage, he's the best. And I guess for the Vikings, they're kind of the weakest overall, so I put them at fourth.
Yeah, I think most of us are in agreement. I know that Mete did have the Lions ahead, but Terry, let me get to you now for special teams.
Special teams, I got put Bears at 1, Packers at 2, Vikings at 3, and then Lions at 4. With the Bears, I mean, Santos is unanimously the second best kicker in the division. And then I don't even think about Mooney when I'm thinking about the special teams. I'm thinking more about Anthony Miller. I believe he averaged, give or take, around 11 on punt returns and then 16 on kick returns. It's not bad, but it's not good either. But I feel like it's a breakout year for the special teams when it comes to Miller. And then with the Green Bay Packers, you got, I believe, Mason Crosby, and then you got guys like Josh Jackson and then Malik Taylor. Taylor's not bad when it comes to kick returns. I believe he averaged around 16, 18 yards, give or take. And with Josh Jackson, I believe he averaged around 6.5, maybe 7. So it's not bad. And then you got Mason Crosby, unanimously the best kicker in the division, doing it for how long? And then you got KJ Osborne, and I believe his name is, it's not coming to mind, Greg Joseph, I think his name is, something like that. Even though Greg Joseph, I believe he was drafted, something like that. So, but you'll understand why I put him ahead of the Detroit Lions for a second. And then you got KJ Osborne. Fortunately, he had like 4 yards plus the 21 yards on punt and kick returns both. And the only reason why I put Lions in last is because of Randy Bullock's during week 1 from last year. Like, how close was it to, like, you know what I'm about to say, especially when it was the Chargers and the Bengals. And then he just kicks it off to the stands in the right corner, and it makes no sense. But I do like St. Brown as their kick returner, though. I believe he averaged probably like 5 and 21 punt and kick return yards both. So that's why I got to say for this whole division.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have Lions a lot higher if it wasn't for that Bengals grudge you're holding against Bullock.
Trust me.
But like, but yeah, no, I see where you're coming from, obviously, and I guess we can move into head coaches, and I guess I'll start. I have the Packers at number 1. Obviously, Matt LaFleur, he just stepped in after Mike McCarthy left, and it's pretty much been like a seamless transition. He's taken them to multiple NFC championship games, so obviously I have to have him at number 1. Number 2, I have the Vikings. I believe their head coach is Mike Zimmer. They've been almost a playoff team almost every season, so he's pretty much done enough to keep his job at this point, even after Stefanski left as the OC there. He's still put together a pretty solid offense there, so I definitely like what he's done. Number 3, I have the Bears. Obviously, we've had a lot of questions about Matt Nagy in terms of his play calling. He really shouldn't be doing the play calling, but he wants to do the play calling, so I guess we'll have to see what happens with that if Justin Fields is starting. And then I guess number 4, I have Motor City Dan Campbell, as they call him. He might be higher after this season, but we haven't seen him coach. And obviously, he'll have Anthony Lynn behind him. So some solid coaching there, but I guess we'll have to see for that. And I guess, Nate, let me get to you for the coaching.
My bad.
I'm you, buddy.
So for coaching, I put Vikings first, Packers second, Bears third, and the Lions fourth. I think the main reason why I put the Vikings ahead of Matt LaFleur was mainly just because Mike Zimmer has won a Super Bowl before, so he does have some experience in terms of like going all the way and I guess winning a Super Bowl. But Packers aren't too far behind. Matt LaFleur has led Green Bay to really deep playoff runs. I guess for the Bears, I put them third. I guess Matt Nagy has a pretty decent regular season record, but not too much success in the postseason. And for the Lions, I put them fourth, mainly because it's going to be Dan Campbell's first year, if I'm not mistaken. So not really too much experience in terms of head coaching.
Yeah, I actually didn't know Mike Zimmer had a ring. I believe he got it with the Cowboys coaching the DB. So it's pretty cool to see. All right, Terry, let me get to you for the coaches.
First guy I got to go with is Mike Zimmer of the Minnesota Vikings. Second, got to go with Green Bay and their head coach, Matt LaFleur. Third, unfortunately, I got to put Matt Nagy at third. And then at fourth, I got Dan Campbell. Explanation-wise, I got to put Zimmer first just because of how long he's been doing it for. And second, I got Matt LaFleur. just because of how long he has been doing it as well, but it's not as long as Zimmer. With third, Nagy just gets the short end of the stick just due to the fact that he hasn't been, you know, as good as the other two ahead of him. And then at four, I mean, Dan Campbell's barely played a game or hasn't played a game at all. So that's why I got him at fourth.
I think you mean hasn't coached a game, but I get what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
Yeah, Mete, just getting to you, what's your ranking for the coaches?
Yeah, okay. So I went Green Bay one. I feel like LaFleur's done a great job. In his first 2 years in Green Bay, they've got a 26-6 regular season record and 2-2 in the postseason, losing both times in the conference championship. And then I went Minnesota second. I feel like Mike Zimmer is on the hot seat this season as he's, I believe, the longest tenured head coach without a Super Bowl at this point. So, despite all that, though, he's pretty solid. I feel like he's got a 64-47-1 record in the regular season and 2-3 playoff record as he took the Vikings to the 2017 NFC Championship game. And then I went Chicago third. I think Matt Nagy is entering his fourth year as the head coach, and they haven't had a losing season under him yet. They've got a 28-20 regular season record with him and a 0-2 playoff record. So he'll be looking to find his first playoff win soon. And then I went with Detroit at fourth. I didn't know this, but I think in 2015, Dan Campbell served as the interim head coach of the Dolphins. They ended up 6-10 that season, and then Campbell, when he took over, wait, no, sorry. Yeah, they ended up 6-10. I think when Campbell took over, they were like 1-3, I want to say, and then they ended up 5-7, which adds up. So yeah, he did a decent job, I feel like. But the other three coaches, they've been coaching for way longer and a full season. So yeah, he's got to be number four for me.
Yeah, I think I was pretty much spot on with what you said. And yeah, I definitely think that there is a solid group of coaches here. I just don't know how much success a lot of them have had. I know you mentioned Zimmer being on the hot seat. I think Nagy's also on the hot seat if he doesn't turn things around, getting a new quarterback in. So we'll definitely have to see. And then I guess just adding up our totals, I'll start. I have the Green Bay Packers at number one, the Minnesota Vikings at number two, the Chicago Bears at number three, and the Detroit Lions at number four. I guess, Terry, I'll get to you. What are your totals?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I believe Green Bay at one, Vikings at two, Bears at three, Lions at four.
And then just getting to you, Nate, what are your totals?
I have Green Bay at one, the Vikings two, and the Bears at three, and the Lions at four.
And then, Mete, how about you?
I got Minnesota one, Green Bay two, Chicago three, Detroit four, and this is without Rodgers. So with him, I'd have the Packers one, Vikings two.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we're pretty much all in agreement that if Aaron Rodgers is there, Packers should be at number one. But let's get to the divisional records. This time, Mete, I'm going to start with you. I guess, how do you see these division games shaping out?
Yeah, so mine might be kind of confusing. I think Minnesota will be 4-2 if Rodgers doesn't play. Actually, no, sorry. I actually have a split with Chicago and Green Bay, so I don't think the record will be uh changed. 4-2 for Minnesota. They split with Chicago and Green Bay, sweep Detroit. Chicago will go 3-3 if Rodgers doesn't play, and 2-4 if he does. And then so then it would be they split with everyone if Rodgers doesn't play, and they get swept by uh Green Bay, and they split with the other two if Rodgers does play. Green Bay 3-3 split with everyone without Rodgers. With Rodgers, they're probably 5-1. I think they only lose to Minnesota once, and then Detroit, I'd go 2-4. doesn't matter if Rodgers is playing or not. They go 1-5 if Rodgers is playing and 2-4 if he isn't. They split with Green Bay if he's not playing and Chicago. And if Rodgers is playing, they get swept by Green Bay and Chicago. No, Green Bay and Minnesota, and they split with Chicago.
So let me just get this straight. Let's organize this for
Yeah.
everyone. So I see here you have Minnesota 4-2, Chicago 3-3, Green Bay 3-3, Detroit 2-4. Is that with Rodgers or without Rodgers?
That's without.
And then with Rodgers, you said Green Bay goes to 5-1.
Yeah.
And then Detroit would go to 1-5, and then
Yeah.
Minnesota would go to 3-3. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. That's what I heard from you, but I wasn't 100% sure. But
Okay.
Nate, let me get to you now, I guess, for division records.
So I have Packers 5-1, the Vikings 4-2, the Bears 2-4, and the Lions 1-5.
I actually think I'm spot on with you as well. I pretty much have those exact records. I have Packers 5-1. Obviously, this is all with Aaron Rodgers. Vikings 4-2. The Vikings do get one win against the Packers, and it's at home, and that would be the Packers' only loss. And then the Vikings' 2 losses come in Chicago and in Green Bay. Bears I have at 2-4. Obviously, their wins would be at home against the Lions and the Vikings, but they'd lose their remaining games. And the Lions' 1 win would be at home against Chicago, and then they would lose the rest of their games to get a 1-5 record. So, Terry, let me just bounce to you for your divisional records.
Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around Mete's rankings or records in general. I'm just sitting here thinking, okay. But with Rodgers as the quarterback in Green Bay, I honestly think I had the same thing as James before I blanked out. Green Bay at 5-1, they lose that one game to the Vikings. Minnesota at 4-2, their 2 losses come to the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers. With that being said, Chicago gets their 4 losses, 2 against Green Bay Packers and 1 against the Lions as well as the Vikings. And then Detroit just loses out to Minnesota and Green Bay, but they do split with Chicago.
All right. Yeah, I think that everyone has a pretty similar record with Rodgers, and then without Rodgers, obviously, that would change a lot of things. So I guess we're pretty much done recapping this division, but I guess, Nate, I'll start with you. Any last thoughts, I guess, on the division in its entirety, or I guess what you think about different teams?
I guess Bears, they might be a little bit underrated this season. I think they're gonna get a few upsets against not just like teams in this division, but just in the league in general. I think they're probably gonna get upsets that people don't really see coming.
Yeah, I feel like we have the Bears ranked as if Andy Dalton's their quarterback. I know Justin Fields is kind of like that wild card where if he steps in at quarterback, they could actually improve by a lot. Obviously, they have the defense to back it up. If that offense can click, I mean, they could play at another level and potentially challenge Green Bay depending on how well Aaron Rodgers is playing or if he's playing. I guess, Mete, what are your thoughts on this division?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of some unknown things in this division, like Rodgers, who the Bears are gonna play, but it looks like it's gonna be a close division. I feel like if Rodgers doesn't play, if he does play, I feel like the Packers will win this division like they always do, and then probably be a top seed like they always are, getting a bye, and then yeah, it looks like Detroit being at 4 here is kind of inevitable.
I could actually see Detroit going 0-6, depending on if Justin Fields starts right away and how he plays. This Bears team could, like Nate said, could be a lot stronger than we're sort of predicting, as obviously we're going with Andy Dalton as the starter. I don't know, Terry, what are your thoughts on this division?
Honestly, I agree with you. Detroit is the punching bag of this division, as we all know. And that record could easily change to 0-6, depending on the quarterback situation down in Chicago. With that being said, you got Chicago on the other hand, tremendous front seven. The secondary just needs to build it back up with guys like Jalen Johnson and then Eddie Jackson, if I said that right. And with that being said, you got the two top tier teams in the division. You got the Vikings, and then you got the not Chicago. What was I just about to say?
The
Green Bay
Packers,
Packers.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't really need to say that much with Green Bay. They have tremendous offense. They just got worried about their linebacker core, honestly. Just develop that a little bit more, and then you could easily see them in the championship game again, or potentially making a deep playoff run. With Minnesota, on the other hand, you're just hoping for guys that did opt out to just help bolster this defensive core. And with that being said, that's the summary of this NFC North division.
Yeah, honestly, just sort of talking about the Vikings. I know Danielle Hunter wasn't healthy, Barr wasn't healthy, Kendricks wasn't healthy. Their secondary underperformed last year. Obviously, they improved that. Yeah, the Vikings' main problem last year was their defense. I don't think their offense had a pretty big issue. They were involved in a lot of high-scoring games last season. So definitely, when you add in guys like Xavier Woods, Mete, you said he should have a bounce back this year. And then Pat Peterson's still pretty solid. He's not at the level that he was in his prime, obviously, still pretty solid. And you got the guys that they've added. I mean, this could be a sleeper team that could potentially win the division. Well, if Aaron Rodgers isn't there, I really see the Vikings winning the division if they're healthy. And then if Rodgers is there, they could definitely challenge for the division title. I know they even beat the Packers once last season. They might even be challenging for the Packers in both games. So definitely something to look out for. Obviously, you talked about the Packers going to the AFC Championship or the NFC Championship again, potentially. Yeah, that's one thing about this offense is that they really got to play well against tough defenses. They even had close games with Chicago last year, and they definitely should have beaten Chicago a lot more easily than they did. Yeah, there's just some games where I don't know what it is. Some defenses just get to Rodgers, whether it's the pass protection, whatever it might be. And we mentioned that the Packers lost some players on that offensive line. So I'm a little bit concerned there. There is a chance for the Vikings to improve. And I mean, Rodgers is going to have to play out of his mind again next year. So we'll definitely have to see about that. But yeah, that's going to be the end of Fanatics Football. Make sure you check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Fan Podcast. We've been posting a lot of picks. Obviously, the NBA Finals did complete, so we will have some football picks for you in the fall. I think all of us will be contributing to that, so definitely go check that out. Make sure for the podcast, you check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Like, subscribe, share. On YouTube, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a review, all that good stuff. And I think we've pretty much had a good preview for everything in this division today. And we'll talk to you guys on the next episode.